Back in the 90s, when point-and-click adventure games were still mainstream, there were two major adventure game video game developers that stuck out from the rest, being the most well-known and respected, LucasArts and Sierra. Both making some of the greatest and most memorable adventure games at the time, while having different game design philosophies and approaches to adventure game genre. So naturally, when people talk about adventure games, it's usually either LucasArts or Sierra's adventure games that first come to their minds. Now, of course, there were many other video game developers making adventure games, but they were mostly overshadowed by these two giants. Even very good ones. One of those developers was Burst Studios and their adventure game called Toonstruck, published by Virgin Interactive Entertainment and released in 1996. Is one of those good games that didn't get the attention I think it deserved. So what makes this game so good and why is it worth talking about? Well, I'm glad you asked. My name is Siperos and these are my thoughts on Toonstruck. The story of Toonstruck is about a cartoon animator, Drew Blank, played by Christopher Lloyd, who has gotten tired of drawing cute bunnies for the fluffy bun bun show he had created. But his boss wants him to draw even more bunnies for the show. Drew gets frustrated and has simply no inspiration for new bunny characters. On that same night, Drew happens to see the fluffy bun bun show on TV and gets sucked into the cartoon world of Utopia. Once there, Drew meets his favorite cartoon character, Flux Wildly, whom he had also created but never got a show for him, and learns from King Hugh, the ruler of Utopia, that his land and denizens are being threatened by evil Count Nefarious, ruler of the Malevolence, who is using the Malevolator to turn everything nice, cute and adorable into evil, ugly and hideous. So King Hugh gives Drew and Flux a quest to help out his bird-brained engineer to build the Cutifier that has the opposite effect to the Malevolator, use it to turn Utopia back to its cute self, and in return the king will help Drew to get back to his own world. And in order to help the engineer, Drew and Flux must explore the cartoon world to look for 11 special items for the Cutifier, but no one knows what those items are. So we have this familiar setting and story of a normal man interacting with toons in a cartoon world, similar to films such as Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Cool World. So that's why it only makes sense that this is an FMV game. My very first FMV game actually. Never played any others before this, despite me finding them very fascinating. And I must say, the video captured live-action Christopher Lloyd is done really well. He actually looks like he's interacting with the cartoon world he's in, its objects and characters. Sure, there are some awkward looking and not as convincing moments as well, but they are very few and far between. So for the most part it works and looks great. The cartoon world and characters in general are also fun to look at, some toons looking like they are from Care Bears and some from Looney Tunes. So the game has aged well, like most 2D games usually do, as far as the graphics are concerned. The cinematics especially look good, and I think they could have easily made an actual cartoon out of this. Let's talk about the characters next, starting with Christopher Lloyd and his character Drew Blank, which yes is a pun name. Didn't even realize that until recently. Anyway, I really like Drew. He's your regular everyday guy and thus easily relatable, at least for me. He is overacting quite a bit, but in a good way because it's fun to watch and he's very convincing. Like I said, he actually looks like he's talking and interacting with the toons. And he has some amusing lines and dialogue with his buddy Flux Wildly. And yes, Lloyd does at one point say perhaps his most famous line from any film he's ever been in. Then his sidekick and favorite creation, Flux Wildly, voiced by Dan Castellaneta. I apologize if I pronounced the name wrong. You have no idea how many times I tried to spell that right. Anyway, I think he's a nice character to have following you around. He's funny, sarcastic, and has a very amusing dialogue with Drew, and I don't think I found him annoying at any point. Sometimes you need to use him, as if he was an item to solve certain puzzles, but not very often. Partly because he's only around in the first half of the game, which is a little shame. As for the other characters, they are all honestly great, and that's one of the things that I really like about Toonstruck. All the toons you meet are fun, have great voice acting and dialogue, and are overall very memorable. The fashionable and sophisticated but still cunning Big Bad Wolf, the caring Carecrow, the pain-loving, hilarious owners of Whack-Me who provide the finest to abuse gadgets, the bodybuilding blue bulldog Jim with Arnold Schwarzenegger's accent, Nefarious' three henchmen who are unfinished Toon sketches that use specially made gadgets to overcome their losses of speech, sight and hearing because each don't have either ears, eyes or a mouth drawn on them. And the main villain, Count Nefarious himself, voiced by Tim Curry, is delightfully evil.
Oh, yes, I know. I can be such a terrible prick.
Even the most annoying character, Fluffy Bun Bun, voiced by Tress MacNeille, is the kind of character you just love to hate and made you wish you had a shotgun and that it was a rapid hunting season.
That's nice.
I really hate that laughter.
My specialty.
Seriously, all the characters you meet are great and would deserve an honorable mention, but I don't want to make this video too long. The puzzles are surprisingly tame, in the first half of the game anyway, for the most part. I was expecting the puzzles to be a bit more challenging and most of all more creative, considering that we are in a cartoon world, where the real world's logic and rules don't apply and thus you would have to think outside of the box. Of course there are some wacky puzzles too, like how you have to literally pick up stars from spinning around someone's head after being hit by a boxing glove. But for the most part the puzzles are pretty straightforward, but most of all fun, and that's what's important. The puzzles in the second half, in Nefarious' castle, felt more challenging, so the difficulty is well balanced in my opinion. However, there is this one big puzzle that I want to highlight. The one the whole first half of the game is centered around, building the cutifier. In order to build it you need 12 specific items, one of them being already placed in so you need to find 11 more, and you are not told what they are. Of course the game does provide clues. First, the items that I use in the Malevolator are shown in its blueprints, spices, dagger, sprites, heart, etc. And secondly, the first item already placed in the cutifier is sugar, replacing the spices. So what does that mean? What kind of items am I supposed to look for? This is where I think a player, especially one whose native language is not English, might run into difficulties. I'm not gonna spoil the entire puzzle for you by naming all the items you need, but in order to figure out what you need, you would have to know the right idioms, phrases or sayings. Like for example the sugar/spices one is, little girls are made of sugar and boys of spices. My language, Finnish, also happens to have that saying, so I am familiar with it. I just never thought about it until people told me in the comment section. But as you can imagine, some cultures simply don't have some of the same idioms the English speakers do. Like in my case for example, I'm just gonna say one more, cloak and dagger. Finnish language, as far as I know, doesn't have its own idiom for cloak and dagger. So your English language and culture knowledge would have to be very good to know all of them. Or you would have to look them up. And there are at least a couple of items that I think were a little too absurd. I'm not gonna say what it is, but let's just say that the item you need to replace the heart with is not a literal soul. But regardless, I think this puzzle is very clever and well designed, even genius in my opinion, but also problematic, specifically for non-native English speakers. I just love how weird and bizarre the cartoon world is with its wacky characters, puzzles, music and humor. The story itself is fun, energetic and very enjoyable to play through. It also has an interesting and very unexpected twist which I am not gonna spoil for you. But don't mistake Toonstruck as a cutesy cartoon game for children. This is more for adults. While I would not say that the game is necessarily inappropriate for children or that it would mess up their mental health and growth and scar them for life or anything, there certainly are some gross and even a little disturbing scenes and some more adult-oriented humor. I think that the fact that this crazy clown, out of all the characters, from Acaurophobia' Nightmares being the one on the game box cover alone scared some people away from buying it. Now, as great and fun as the game is, there is one big problem with it. You don't get a truly satisfying ending, but a sequel-baiting one. Because you see, the Toonstruck that we got had less material than was originally planned. During the development, the game was divided in half for whatever reasons, and the rest of the game was supposed to be released in a form of a sequel, which unfortunately never happened due to Toonstruck's poor sales. Why did it do so badly? Well, I think there's a couple of possible reasons. First, they were no LucasArts or Sierra. It's hard enough to try and sell your very first game as a new, unknown studio as it is. But I believe that the second reason was more detrimental. The game's release timing. Toonstruck was released around the time when both game developers and gamers looked more towards 3D, seeing them as the future and 2D games as outdated. If the game was released earlier, by 1 year in 1995, like it was originally supposed to before it was delayed to late 96, I think the game would have sold a lot more copies and got the attention and praise it deserved. Kate Aram, one of the developers of the game who, as far as I know, owns some rights to Toonstruck and currently owns the right to Toonstruck 2, has tried to make the sequel happen for many years now. Aram has stated that he would need to raise a significant capital and fan interest to bring Toonstruck 2 to life, and also to show investors and distributors that they can sell hundreds of thousands of copies. That could be done with Kickstarter, especially now when more people know about the game. But from what I understood, there is still some unresolved legal issues preventing that, since Toonstruck's rights were inadvertently split. As far as I know, there hasn't been any big news recently regarding Toonstruck 2 project's development, and frankly, I think the whole thing has gone cold by now and don't think it's going to happen. And that's really sad because the screenshots of the unused locations that were supposed to be used in the original game and the sequel that you can easily find on the internet look like really fun places I would love to visit. And I bet the game would have had more fun characters to encounter. I know that one of the characters, whom you can even see in the game's trailer, is the artist Vincent van Gogh, Drew's idol whom you were supposed to meet in the full game. Would have been interesting to meet him in his Toon incarnation. I heartily recommend Toonstruck. It's easily one of the most fun adventure games I have ever played. The characters, puzzles, original story, and the overall journey you'll have in the cartoon world of Utopia more than make up for the unsatisfying sequel-baiting ending. We may never know how the story was supposed to end, but that doesn't mean we can't enjoy the game for what it is. I would recommend Toonstruck to anyone who likes cartoons, wacky and more adult-oriented humor, and Christopher Lloyd as an actor. While the puzzles are pretty straightforward, at least in the first half of the game, not all of them are that easily figured out. So the game does offer some challenge, and I think is overall better suited for more experienced adventure game players. Toonstruck is simply a blast to play through. And there you go, folks. Those were my thoughts on Toonstruck. What are your thoughts on the game? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.